You're listening to Procurement 6, the weekly podcast from the team at Art of Procurement that summarizes this week in procurement in just 6 short segments.
Hi there, I'm Philip Ideson and today is Friday, February 2nd, 2024.
6.
As procurement professionals, we're always on the lookout for ways to bring additional sources of value to our business. But while we typically think of that in terms of the expense side of our business, what about the revenue side of the profit and loss account? Now, our colleagues on the sales side of the business are always looking for advice on how to navigate procurement in their sales pursuits. How can they navigate the process? What does the way that the procurement team communicates with them mean about their role in the business? What are the signals to look for to determine if procurement is a partner or a blocker? Now, no one knows this better than you. So as a first step, offer to walk the sales team in your business through the ways that procurement is incentivized, how they segment suppliers and potential suppliers, and what to look for to determine if they have a real shot at winning business or they're just there to make up the numbers. Doing so is going to create value that's going to go way beyond the savings that you may be able to generate.
5.
In a recent AOP Live session, we spoke with Aubrey Zimmerman, procurement analyst at Lattice, and K.R. Barron, the principal product marketing manager and Productive, about the challenges and misconceptions around software, especially SaaS procurement. Now, one of the biggest myths is that procurement are just so-called paper pushers and can't add much value to the process, which of course couldn't be further from the truth. In this conversation, I asked Aubrey to discuss how procurement quite literally saves the business from a disastrous software purchasing process. Let's listen to a snippet. I wonder if you could just share some of your kind of thoughts on why there's so many cases when it comes to buying SaaS where there isn't actually a typical process, a typical buying process that's used.
Yes, I think it can seem really daunting to an organization that may not have a dedicated procurement team. So in those organizations, you'll typically see like department owners are owning their budgets and they all have their own way that they source their contracts. And there's not standardization really across the board. And I think with that, you see a lot of those teams living out of Google spreadsheets. They're using calendars to track their renewals, or they're waiting on suppliers to reach out to them. And time is the biggest resource to me working in procurement. And when you're not able to get ahead of those agreements and you're living in a reactive state versus proactive, it can be hard to enact change while you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants to get things done, because the lift to start the process for procurement, you have to, enact policies and guidelines. You have to centralize and streamline your workflows. And then you also have to get all of these different teams cross-functionally to buy in. So if you don't have a dedicated resource that is going to be there to help you with that, that's a huge lift for someone that their full-time job is not to procure software. So it's a lot of manual process. And I think procurement gets brought in way too late when some of these bad habits have already started. And it's hard to change when you're kind of living in a world that's reactive to just try to get things done.
Yeah, especially in high growth organizations where, a lot of times everybody has been left to buy whatever they want because that's just been the cycle, the part of the business cycle. And then to try and rein all that back in when you have a lot of stakeholders who are used to being able to go and do whatever they want is really hard from a procurement perspective too. And I wonder, when you find yourself in that situation, what's the pitch, of why procurement can come and actually help bringing a more formal process to the buying of SaaS?
Well, I think one is just educating your stakeholders on the value that procurement is bringing. So they may not be aware of all the risks that are associated with the procurement or the tool that they're procuring. I think procurement has evolved from being, just paper pushers helping you get things done to really enabling them to make an informed choice about their purchase. So giving them that white glove experience, showing them out of the gate the value that they're going to get from procurement, how much time they're going to save. They don't have to go back and forth with all these suppliers, and they have somebody liaisoning through all the teams, tracking everything down to make sure everything is being completed. So they find that even if they love to procure software, they don't have to.
Right. Yeah, and it's not their it's not why they're employed. It's not what they're employed to do. There was one organization I remember speaking to that was high growth a long time ago, and their software engineers were doing procuring, And software engineers in Silicon Valley, very highly paid, very difficult to get hold of. The pitch was essentially, let's just leave you to do your job that you're paid for, and let us do everything else. And the measurement wasn't how much money can you save; it was how many hours can you save from those highly paid software engineers from actually being able to do what they were paid to do, as opposed to working in procurement processes.
If their passion is moonlighting as a procurement professional, I won't stop them, but I'll take it off their plate.
To listen to the full episode, go to artofprocurement.com/podcast or search for Art of Procurement and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can click the link in today's show notes.
4.
83% of corporate and private equity executives recently polled by Deloitte said they expect their organization's merger and acquisition deal volume to increase in 2024. The survey found a stronger focus on M&A preparation and strategy by companies amid improving macroeconomic conditions, and cited M&A as a key driver of their organization's growth. So what does that mean for procurement, at least from a supplier perspective? We'll leave the impact on it if it's your own business is being impacted for another day. Now, primarily, now is a good time to check the language in your key suppliers' contracts for anything related to change of control. Do you have a right to terminate a contract, for example, should there be a material change of ownership at your supplier? And also, are you protected against large price hikes that often follow an acquisition, especially if the acquirer is a PE firm rather than a strategic buyer?
This is Procurement 6 from Art of Procurement. To get notified every time an episode is published, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe. 3.
Not that long ago, using drones for final mile delivery seemed like a futuristic idea, a business innovation better suited to sci-fi pictures than supply chain management. And while drones aren't yet covering the final mile at scale, they are gaining a concentrated foothold in certain areas, just enough access to consumers and real-world conditions to kick development into overdrive. Now, companies like Amazon, Walmart, UPS, and FedEx are incorporating drones and vertical takeoff and landing craft in their middle mile and final mile logistics, battling each other for rollout speed, operational safety, and cost effectiveness, not to mention getting consumers to warm up to the idea of deliveries from directly above. Now, in this week's episode of the Art of Supply podcast, Kelly Barner looks at the current state of innovation and experimentation in drone final mile delivery. You can hear the full episode on all major podcast platforms or read Kelly's feature-length article on artofprocurement.com.
2.
In Chinese culture, the dragon represents good luck, strength, and health. Given the challenges dominating this year's headlines, all of us are probably going to need a balance of all three to make it through this year successfully. And every new day's headlines, it reminds us that no matter where we live and work, global forces can swoop in and change everything at a moment's notice. When geopolitics is the focus, some players on the world stage have an outsized impact, and none more so than China. In this week's episode of the Sourcing Hero podcast, host Kelly Barner welcomes back Chris Lance, Senior Director at Una. They talk about 3 major news stories related to China that all procurement and supply chain professionals should be aware of. To listen to the full episode of the Sourcing Hero, click the link in today's show notes, or subscribe to the Sourcing Hero podcast wherever you find your audio content.
1.
On February the 8th, I'll be moderating a star-studded panel debating the topic of procurement orchestration. We'll be debating what procurement orchestration actually is and uncovering best practices in implementing procurement orchestration from practitioner leaders from Bayer, Goldman Sachs, and Bristol-Myers Squibb. And they're just doing that within their organizations. They're going to share a lot of tips around procurement orchestration within their businesses and from their experience. Now, to register to join us live or to be able to immediately access the recording as soon as we finish the session, you can head over to artofprocurement.com/calendar to register.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next Friday at 6 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. If you've enjoyed this pod, help us grow and tell your peers to search for Procurement 6 wherever they get their podcasts.